I've completed the sculpture of my hammerhead shark and I'm ready to start making a really great render of it. I'm quite pleased with the outcome of my sculpture. I spent a lot of time refining the edges, cleaning everything up, and I'm walking away with something that I'm quite pleased with. So it's time to make a pretty picture of my good hard work. I'm going to be using cycles once again to make a really great high quality render of this sculpture, and I wanted to begin to layer in a new detail called subsurface scattering. Subsurface scattering revolves around the idea that on certain surface types, the light ray is going to penetrate into the surface, bounce around on the inside before it reflects or refracts back out into the environment. If you think about our skin, it's incredibly porous. It's not like super hard like metal or gold. The light rays are actually going to penetrate into the skin, change a little bit how it works on the inside, and then eventually it's going to pop back out. We want to simulate that here inside the computer. You're going to get the best results with subsurface scattering when using cycles. It's one of those values added when working with this rendering engine, and I want to show you how it's working. I got a very simple scene set up here, nothing too magical. It's very similar to what some of the other scenes that we've been looking at. As a reminder, I got a point light in the front and a spotlight in the back. I've intentionally doing some pretty heavy backlighting on this object to make the illusion of subsurface scattering a little bit more noticeable. You're going to find that subsurface scattering is everywhere, and we should add it to all our objects, but it's really the most noticeable on thin objects where the light has an opportunity to penetrate all the way through. I've turned on my render preview in my viewport settings. That way we can see in the viewport precisely what's going on. And of course, I'm working with cycles. Over on my material, I've just added a simple little default material onto the object for my hammerhead shark. Nothing magical at all. I really haven't changed pretty much any of the values, but I want to start exploring this subsurface scattering. You can find it way down over here in our material properties. There's a couple things that we want to look at. As I mentioned, this is just a principled BSDF, the default material that comes with all things Blender. And subsurface scattering is turned on right here. There's really three things that we need to manage when it comes to subsurface scattering: the amount of subsurface scattering, the direction, so X, Y, and Z, and then the color. Now, I don't think that these are the default values for the color, and I think the default radius on X, Y, and Z is a little bit different, but it doesn't matter because it's all scene specific, and the size of your object is going to determine these values. Let's just crank the subsurface amount to 1.0 so we can begin to see what this is going to produce. Let's just crank it and see what we get. If you look closely over here at the front, it's getting real thin, so the light is penetrating all the way through the surface, bouncing around, and kind of giving us this fleshy appearance. Look at this back fin over here. That's pretty neat. That's unexpected. We're getting this cool kind of scattering effect on the inside. And because I'm backlighting it, you can see that the thin part of this top fin is also producing that really kind of soft skin, organic feel to it a little bit. The color is kind of neat, and this is where you really want to start to experiment around a little bit, because we can customize the color of our subsurface scattering to match the content. Now think of this kind of like, almost like the blood color or the flesh color underneath the surface of the skin. If we were to change this to like red, now our object's going to go kind of red. Here it is at kind of a pinky color, and we're getting this really neat effect. So we can dial this in to get a really neat result. I've intentionally cranked the values here. I would never have it be completely at 1, but maybe over here at 0.5, 0.3, somewhere right around there. Yeah, we're getting a little bit of that hit, and it's starting to feel kind of fleshy, which is kind of neat. I'm going to put my values back to almost kind of a light blue, or maybe even a green, a coral color perhaps. And let's just see what we get. It does take a minute to render. It's going to update very slowly. It's very, very grainy here inside the preview because we're only doing 32 samples without any sort of denoising. So it's going to get kind of blocky. But even in this low resolution blocky state, you can start to see the big time benefits of adding subsurface scattering. It begins to simulate flesh and or absorbent materials quite instantly. It's pretty compelling stuff, and I really think you're going to enjoy it. Another thing that you may want to play around with are the radius of the X, Y, and Z values. Each of these is going to give you kind of a different look and feel. If I was to really crank the X, you can see that this is the look and feel that we're getting here. So you got to customize it. Generally speaking, stay close to a 0 to 1 scale with all of these values. I think you're going to find that if you overdrive it, whoa, that's getting kind of crazy. If you overdrive some of these values, it's going to get pretty intense. So small movements on all of these values are going to give you some really great results. I almost always just kind of mess around with the first one a little bit. And second one, just kind of experiment. Small movements here or there can give me kind of the look and feel that I'm after, with the idea that I'm going to go in and continue to customize this as I get a little bit more granular with my render settings and all the materials that I'm going to use to describe my fish, my hammerhead shark. So that's subsurface scattering. Turn it on, experiment. It's a great way to start simulating flesh in our renders.